Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on our 2021 calendar. It's our last for the year, Employment Accommodations, Innovations, and Assistive Technology for Brain Injury, offered by the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. I'm Maria Crowley, NASHIA's Director of Professional Development, and I'm going to moderate today. Also with us, but off camera, is Haley Cushion, who is our Member Services and Communications Organizer. She's going to be our organizer today. We thank you for joining us. NASHIA is a nonprofit organization created to assist state government in promoting partnerships and building systems to meet the needs of individuals with brain injury and their families. A little bit of information is provided for you on the GoToWebinar platform, which we're using today for the webinar. They provide online support should you experience any issues, and handouts for today's presentation are also available for download. Check your attendee control panel in the handouts pane. Please submit any of your questions in the questions pane on your control panel, and if we have time, we'll address those at the end with our speakers of our presentation. If we run out of time, it's possible that the presenters can respond to your questions via email later. Continuing education credits for today's webinar are available for social work, certified rehabilitation counseling, as well as general certificates of attendance. At the end of the live webinar, you'll receive an email with an evaluation, which you will complete, and your certificate will be emailed to you at that time. The webinar is also archived for later access on our website under Trainings on Demand. So for viewers of the recording, you would go there to Trainings on Demand to find information about how to obtain a certificate. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's session and to our presenters. Melanie Wetzel is going to be presenting first. Melanie is with the Job Accommodations Network, which I know many of you are familiar with. Melanie joined the JAN staff as a consultant on the cognitive neurological team in February of 2008. She's got a very lengthy history of teaching and advocating for students with disabilities in the public school system, holds a master's degree in special ed and a Bachelor of Arts in English. She recently completed a graduation certification in career planning and placement for youth in transition and became a certified brain injury specialist in December of 2014. As a lead consultant on the cognitive neurological team, Melanie specializes in learning disabilities, mental impairments, developmental disabilities, autism spectrum disorders, and brain injuries. Next on our roster is Ashley McElroy, who began working with the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services as a rehabilitation engineer in 2010. She holds a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama and evaluates consumers of all ages with various disability types in home, school, work environments, and then recommends assistive technology systems or accommodations to help them overcome the limitations of their disabilities. She has served on the Governor's Youth Leadership Forum Advisory Committee in a number of roles and has been a presenter for various disability-related conferences and seminars. She's recently assumed an additional role as the project manager for Alabama's Technology Act program, where she'll be developing the device lending library and providing assistive technology trainings and demonstrations for state residents. Welcome to both of you, and Melanie's going to be presenting first. And thank you.
All right. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to join you. I'm going to start out here. Just skip over here to, let me just get control of it. Okay, got control of it. Okay, just a little bit of information here about JAN. For those of you who may not be familiar with JAN, we were established in 1983 as a free national service. All of our services are free. We work on a national basis. We get calls from all over the place, other countries as well. We are located on the downtown campus of West Virginia University. Right now, a lot of us are working from home. We specialize in job accommodations and the employment provisions of the ADA. We assist with the interactive process, and that can be at any point in the process. When I first started at JAN, I remember talking to an employer who said, I think I have just enough information to be dangerous. Can you help walk me through that process? Absolutely, we can do that. We give targeted technical assistance. We provide comprehensive resources. If we can't help you or you have needs other than what we can help with, we try to get you those resources to people who can answer your questions. And one of the most important things is that we maintain confidentiality. It's really important for people to call and be able to explore all kind of options when they know that that information stays confidential. A lot of people.
Melanie,
Yes.
I'm just going to jump in really quickly. It's a little difficult to hear you. I'm wondering if you could just come a little closer to your mic.
Okay, sure. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So, okay, sure, no problem. I'm sorry about that. So we do maintain confidentiality. That's really important for people to call and be able to explore all their options and have no fear the information's going anywhere. We can communicate via the telephone, chat, text, TTY, relay, email, and social networks. So there's no way you can't get a hold of Jan. We offer live and archive training like we're doing right now. And then we work as a partner in making model employers. So we have teams at Jan, and when you call or get on the live chat, if you send an email, it will go to a PA, and that's a program assistant. And when you're talking to the program assistant, they'll ask you questions about what the disability is, what's going on, just so that they can get it to the proper team member and to the proper team. Sometimes there's no disability known. The employer sometimes doesn't know what the disability is, but wants to discuss ADA issues. But we have a motor team that works with motor issues like knee and back and shoulder impairments, paraplegia, hemiplegia, MS. We have a sensory team that works with vision and hearing and diabetes, respiratory issues, allergies. There's an entrepreneurship team for people who are interested in self-employment, small businesses. And then the cognitive neurological team is a team I'm on. I have 3 other team members. And we do everything cognitive neurological. That really encompasses a lot. It's all mental health, learning disabilities, autism, intellectual disabilities, brain injuries, epilepsy, sleep disorders. Okay, so just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I just wanted to go over real quickly what reasonable accommodations are. And they're modifications or changes that are made to a job application process. Let's say somebody needs to have extra time when they take a pre-employment test. It could be modifications or changes to the work environment or to the manner in which the position is customarily performed that enable a qualified individual with a disability to perform the essential functions of the position. We're going to have lots of examples of work accommodations throughout the presentation here. And then also modifications or changes that enable an employee with a disability to enjoy equal benefits and privileges of employment as are enjoyed by other similarly situated employees without disabilities. That could be access to a lunchroom or a credit union or a gymnasium or a summer picnic or a retirement party in a restaurant downtown and somebody needs help with transportation to get there maybe. And here's the definition of disability under the ADA. An individual has a disability if he or she has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities. Substantially limits means it's more limited than the average person, so it's not a really high bar to meet. And that limitation is in one or more major life activities. I'm going to have a list of those here later on. But those are things that we do, most of us, without really thinking much about, like sitting, standing, walking, thinking, remembering. And it can be body systems as well. If the person has a record of such an impairment, say someone had cancer, but they've been healed, they have that record, they may need an accommodation for leave to go once a year for testing to make sure the cancer hasn't come back. And then that third prong there is someone who's regarded as having an impairment. And that's when an employer, somebody, your manager, would treat you as if you had a disability when you don't. Okay, just talk a little bit about disclosure. Disclosure is probably one of the biggest issues that we talk about on our team. And I think because a lot of the disabilities on our team are not seen. They're invisible, if you want to say invisible. And so it takes, you know, or to, you have to be intentional to disclose that. And so we get a lot of questions about when do I do that? How do I do that? What do I say? Do I have to do it? Can I ask for an accommodation without disclosing? Well, the answer to that would be yes, you can try that. But, you know, the employer has a right to know if there's a disability or medical condition involved. Generally speaking, you do not have to ask for an accommodation or disclose. You don't have to disclose, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. You don't have to disclose a disability until you need an accommodation. And that may not be during the hiring process. It might not be when you first start a job. When you first start a job, you may not really know what you need until you get in the job. It could be on the first day when you realize, hey, I'm going to need some help here. Or it could be months or years down the road when something about your disability changes or something about the job changes. Some people want to disclose and be open and honest up front, but it's not being dishonest and covert in the beginning if you don't disclose. And so it's really a personal decision, but we can help walk through, you know, the negatives and the positives of that, and how's the best way to do that, when's the best time to do that. There is no set time to do that. Disclosure is specifically giving out personal information about your disability, and that's current information. You want to provide information about the nature of the disability, the limitations, or how the disability affects your capacity to learn or perform the job effectively, and then accommodations you'll need in order to do the job. Really, the limitations are probably the most important part of that, because we could have 3-5 people with a brain injury, and that's just pretty vague to say have a brain injury. And that really doesn't mean a whole lot to the employer. But when they get to know the limitations, I have trouble with concentration and memory. You know, I need my directions in writing because I have trouble remembering things that I heard. That gives the employer a lot more information and helps them understand what's really needed. And if you have accommodations that you know will work, that's great to provide those to the employer. And if you're not sure, that's okay too. That's the interactive process where you go back and forth with the employer to talk about, hey, what do you need? Why do you need it? And then, of course, there's Jan. That's what our services are for. That's what we do all day long. We talk to really whoever calls, but we mainly talk to employers and individuals, family members of the individuals, to try to help figure out what would be successful and effective accommodations for people with disabilities. So why do you disclose? You disclose to ask for job accommodations, which we're going to see examples of all of these, to receive benefits or privileges of employment that other similarly situated employees are entitled to, and then to explain an unusual circumstance. So here we have an example of asking for an accommodation. Rhonda needs to ask for an accommodation of a flexible schedule while she adjusts to new medication. She's having difficulty sleeping and waking up and has been like 3 days in a row. She's wary of disclosing her medical condition, but she doesn't want to get into disciplinary action. Here's an example of a benefit or a privilege of employment. Steve has TBI and PTSD, and he has difficulty attending large meetings where there are the distractions of many people and lots of noise. And so maybe Steve needs to be able to stay in his office and participate in the meeting by phone. And then here's an example of an unusual circumstance. Suri works in a warehouse in Florida. She's had no issues at work until the air conditioning breaks down and she begins to have difficulty regulating her body temperature. She needs to disclose and ask for an accommodation. Depending on how long that air conditioning is going to be out, can she work in another area or does she need to take leave maybe? So how do you disclose? The individual must let the employer know that an adjustment or change at work is needed for a reason related to a medical condition. And then you don't have to use you can't use plain English. You don't have to mention the ADA, and you don't have to use the phrase reasonable accommodation. Now, we have a sample letter, and it does use that language, and it's okay to use that. If you write a letter to the employer, you use that language. The employer has no question in what you're asking for. But you do want to, if you just are talking to your employer, your supervisor, it can be as easy as saying, hey, I'm having difficulty getting to work on time because of medication I take for a medical condition. Can I talk to you about that? And that gives the supervisor or employer, yes, you're asking for some help and you're relating it to a medical condition. You know, if someone were to say, hey, I'm having trouble getting to work on time, The employer doesn't know if that's related to a medical condition or if it's just somebody who's up too late at night and can't get up in the morning. So you want to relate that back to your disability or your medical condition. And it's best to do as much as possible to help the employer understand at the beginning, because sometimes it can go back and forth, and that can take up a lot of time. And so who do you disclose to, verbally or in writing? Under the ADA, there's no requirement that you provide an accommodation request or a disclosure in writing. At Jan, we recommend that people do so. And then the employer has that documentation of what you ask for and when you ask for it. And you can talk to your employer, your supervisor, a staff member, an HR representative, or another appropriate person if there's a ADA coordinator, somebody like that, and you can find out through your HR department, if you have an employee handbook, who that person would be that you need to disclose to. A lot of people don't want their supervisor to know medical information, and that's fine. Excuse me. Medical information should go to the HR person or an appropriate person. They determine, yes, the person does have a disability, and then they put that information away in a separate file that no one else has access to, or very limited people have access to. Your supervisor may need to be involved in the accommodation process, but they don't need to know the medical condition. And so you need documentation of a disability. There's nothing under the ADA that requires that, but the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they're the enforcing agency of the ADA, they say that the employer has the right to ask for that, just to substantiate the need for the accommodation. And that's particularly when the disability is not obvious and when the need for the accommodation is not obvious. And so here's what you want to include in that documentation: the diagnosed impairment, the major life activity that substantially limits you or the employee, the individual. And those, here are some, but it's not inclusive, but here are some of those major life activities: caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, standing, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, and working. And then it also includes major bodily functions, and those include but aren't limited to functions of the immune system, normal cell growth. Used to be that cancer really wasn't included in the ADA, but now, since the definition has kind of expanded the medical conditions, if you don't have normal cell growth and you have cancer, that could be covered. It can include digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive functions as well. And then the documentation needs to come from the appropriate medical professional. For a brain injury, that's most likely going to be a neurologist. It could be a family doctor, if that's who's treating you currently. If there are some mental health issues involved, that could be a psychiatrist or psychologist, nurses, physical or occupational therapists, speech therapists, depending on what the limitations that you have related to brain injury. Could be vocational rehabilitation professionals, licensed mental health professionals, or even educational professionals. So here are just the major impairments that we talk about: cognitive impairments like learning and remembering and concentrating, physical impairments such as fatigue, gross or fine motor skills, and sleeping. Psychological impairments might include irritability, social interaction, managing stress, and then sensory impairments such as breathing, seeing, and hearing. Now here's a list of the limitations that we see most frequently at JAN and that we answer questions about. And those are the limitations most frequently addressed for brain injury. And those include visual and physical limitations, memory, attendance, problem solving, issues of change, working effectively, handling stress and emotions, maintaining stamina and concentration, and staying organized and meeting deadlines. So let's just talk real briefly about performance and conduct. An employer can hold all employees to the same standards of performance and conduct, and that means an employee with a disability. The only difference is the employer would need to consider accommodations that help the employee with a disability meet that performance or conduct standard. They don't have to remove standards, they don't have to reduce them, they don't have to remove essential functions, but what they do is look at the accommodations that help somebody do the essential functions or meet those standards. And I said before, there's no required time to ask for an accommodation, but you don't want to wait till it's too late. Sometimes people wait until they're getting terminated and they said, oh, wait a minute, I've got a disability, and that can be too late. We would advise people to disclose and ask for an accommodation when it's first brought to their attention that their performance or conduct is not up to par, and they can relate that to their disability. And sometimes it's difficult for people who have cognitive issues, maybe to understand that they're not doing their whole job. Maybe they don't understand the whole scope of their job, and so maybe they're not doing something, and it can really be helpful for the employer, supervisor, to bring that to the employee's attention so they can say, oh, okay, yeah, I am having some problems with concentration. I think I need some help with that. And then that can help the employer understand what's going on. They can get accommodations in place, and that can help both parties. So here we have an example of performance. A real estate agent who had difficulty keeping materials organized for his clients. He tried to organize the paperwork in different colored notebooks, one for each client, but was unable to keep track of them. So his existing system was streamlined to use one large binder with colored tabs to separate and keep track of each client's specific paperwork kept in one easily accessible location. A key in the front of the binder listed clients by color. So if he was leaving home, he was leaving the office, he just had to grab one notebook, because before he had them in his trunk, he had them at home. They were all over the place, and he didn't have the ones he needed. So here's an example of conduct, and this is a court employee who was having difficulty with emotions after returning to work following a TBI. She was diagnosed with pseudo-bulbar affect, or PBA, where she would have outbursts of uncontrollable laughter at inappropriate times. And so she requested some education for her coworkers so that they would understand the PBA and the inappropriate laughter. And she was given extra breaks to help manage her stress, a temporary lightening of her workload, and a flexible schedule to allow her time for doctor's appointments and counseling. Now, in this example, they did lighten her load temporarily, and employers can certainly do that. They can go above and beyond the ADA, especially if somebody's been out, they're just getting back to work, maybe trying to get on their feet, but they're not required to do that. They'd be required to look at accommodations that would help the person do their job. So now we're just going to talk about some of the most popular, biggest categories of accommodations. And purchasing or modifying equipment or products, and you're going to hear a lot more about this, excuse me, from Ashley. Assistive technology, we recommend sometimes very simple assistive technology. A sticky note. I get interrupted, and when I get back to my work, I have no idea where I was. Okay, use a sticky note to mark where you were when you started reading, when you were interrupted, and you can come right back to that. And then there's a lot of higher level assistive technology for someone who doesn't have the use of their hands and they can still use a computer. And so there's all kinds of assistive technology. Here on this slide, we have pictures of a task lamp for someone who can't use overhead lights due to headaches and light sensitivity. There's a watch that can be programmed for reminders. Somebody needs to be reminded to clock in and clock out, or when to go to lunch, when to come back from lunch. That third picture there is a smart pen. That can be very helpful for people who need to take notes and have difficulty. Taking notes, it is a very difficult task involving a lot of executive functioning skills, and some people with a brain injury have difficulty with that. What this pen does is it records what's going on at the time you're writing, so you can write brief notes, then go back to them, click on them with the pen, and then the pen will tell you what was going on at that time. Now, it does require special notebook. In the bottom row, there's a pocket recorder. A lot of people can benefit from having recorded directions or instructions. Sometimes they hear verbal instructions, can't remember them, so they have them recorded. They can listen to them several times if they need to. There's a headset. It's not wireless, but a wireless headset is really great because you can get out and move around. You can use both your hands. You don't get a crick in the neck by trying to hold the phone, while you write. And so that can really help free up people that might have some physical difficulties, people who need to get up and walk around and do other things while they're talking on the phone at the same time. And then, of course, there's a tablet with apps lots and lots and lots of apps. Can't really keep up with all those apps. Okay, so here we have a mail response clerk for a large insurance company who was having difficulty thinking through the steps when sorting mail after returning to work following surgery for brain tumors. So he was provided with a flow chart of topics and related items so that it was easier for him to place the mail in the appropriate baskets. The baskets and the steps in the flow chart were color-coded to help him with differentiation. And so here we have making the work site accessible. And employers are tasked in making the work site accessible for employees with disabilities. And that's usually triggered by an accommodation request from someone with a disability that needs something in the work site changed. That can include parking. Somebody may need parking up close to the door. They may need parking in the back of the employer's work site where it's closest to their workstation. There's a door, a little threshold ramp that can be very useful for everyone if there are different heights of flooring in a building, particularly for someone in a wheelchair, someone using a rollator or a cane, or just people walking when there are different heights of the floor. And then that third picture there is an automatic door opener, which can be really helpful for people who can't open doors or have difficulty opening a traditional door. Here we have an example, excuse me, of an office worker who was having difficulty with balance and coordination and walking steadily due to a brain injury. The employer had observed her falling a couple of times on the way to the printer and the restrooms. And so they provided the employee with handrails to and from her workspace in the common areas. They gave her her own printer so she didn't have to go out walking around. And her workstation setup was changed too for easier access to files, materials, and equipment. Now, job restructuring can be a very successful job accommodation. What that means is that the employer doesn't have to take away essential functions, but they can take away marginal functions. And sometimes taking away marginal functions can free that person up to spend more time and energy on the essential functions. Or they might switch out some of the marginal functions that might be easier for someone to do or don't take up as much time. But even though the employer doesn't have to remove essential functions, they can still look at maybe changing up how those functions are done or when those functions are done. So here we have an employee with seizures from a brain injury who is a member of a cleaning crew, and he's restricted from working on a ladder. He can perform all of the functions of his job except for the task of maintaining the overhead lighting fixtures. So the job tasks of a second crew member include cleaning a small kitchen in the employee's lounge, which is a task the first crew member can perform. So the employer switched these two specific tasks performed by these two crew members at no cost. Everybody's doing their job and all the work's getting done. So modifying schedule and allowing leave, those are some of the most requested accommodations that we find on our team due to brain injury, due to mental health issues. Modifying a schedule can mean anything that works for the employee as long as it works for the employer. And that can mean adjusting arrival and departure times. It can mean rearranging breaks. It can mean working part-time, reduced hours. It can also mean, maybe working when we find sometimes when people come back after brain injury because of the fatigue and trying to get back on their feet, maybe they can work half days, or maybe they work Tuesday and Thursday and they have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday off to rest. And then they start to work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and have Tuesdays and Thursdays off. Anything like that works to help the employee that isn't a hardship for the employer can be an effective accommodation. And then allowing leave. And leave can be used in large chunks. It can be used in 15-minute intervals if that's how you're paid at your workplace. It could be used for doctor's appointments. It could be used for healing. It could be used for surgery. Lots of reasons. So here we have a college professor who had incurred a traumatic brain injury who needed to do office work in the mornings when she was most alert and best able to concentrate. So she was accommodated by scheduling departmental meetings and the classes that she taught after 11 a.m. so that she could have uninterrupted morning hours to get her planning, studying, and administrative tasks done. Now, like I said, leave is really a big accommodation. There's FMLA leave, which is federal mandated family medical leave, and that's 12 weeks. That's for someone who's worked full-time the year before. And then there's ADA leave, and ADA leave works similar to FMLA. It's not limited to 12 weeks, but it's not unlimited either. ADA leave can go into effect when somebody doesn't qualify for FMLA or when they've already used their FMLA and it's been exhausted. But we often talk about alternate accommodations. Employers want to get employees back to work. Employees want to get back to work. So what are some alternate accommodations? Well, I talked about modified schedules, maybe getting somebody back part-time. Telework, can they work from home? You know, a commute can really take a lot out of a person, depending on how stressful that commute might be. And if somebody doesn't have to make that commute and they're able to work from home, can save a lot of precious energy and stamina, even if they're only working a couple hours a day, and then they work up 2 more hours per day and per week. And then there's reassignment. We're going to have some examples of that later, but that's being moved into another position that you're qualified for, which maybe could allow you a modified schedule or could allow telework if the current job the person's in doesn't allow for those. And modifying policies. Under the ADA, there's what's called a modified workplace policy, which states that an employer can make changes for a person with a disability that they don't change for others. And the reason for that is the employer sets the policy so the employer can look at modifying those policies. That could be a uniform policy, could be a no dogs in the workplace policy, could be drinking at a workstation policy, any kind of policy. So here's an example of one. Tad obtained a new job working in customer service. The employer policy prohibited the use of cell phones while on phone duty in a customer service position. So Tad had used several different apps to keep himself organized and to manage his time. So once the employer understood, once Tad explained how he used those apps on his phone, and the employer recognized their effectiveness, the policy was modified to allow Tad to use his phone for the sole purpose of the organization and time management apps that helped make him successful. Now here's accommodation of providing readers, interpreters, and coaches, and that depends really on if it causes a hardship, how much is that service needed. Providing a reader is usually done for testing. You know, if somebody needs a reader all day long, it might not be effective. A reader in testing situations reads. They don't interpret, they don't define words, they don't help anybody understand anything, they just read. An interpreter would be needed for somebody who's deaf, and that would depend too on how much they needed an interpreter during the day. Is it maybe it's specific for training, or it's specific for a trip, work trip they're going on, and that the employer would determine, is that reasonable, or are there other accommodations that could work? And then job coaches. You know, sometimes an employee needs a job coach when they first start a job, and then the job coach is you know, weaned away from that, or it might be somebody who's getting new job responsibilities and needs a coach to come back in to help them acclimate and learn those new job tasks. And here we have a veteran in a new customer service position who has PTSD and a TBI. After disclosing his disability and requesting accommodations, his employer provided him with a cubicle close to an exit where his back was against a wall. This helped alleviate some of his anxiety, but he still had difficulty with memory and organization. So the employer obtained a job coach through the VA to help the employee adjust to his new position. The job coach helped to develop a customized form for taking notes, a system for organizing the employee's workspace, and suggested email communication so he will have written responses. Breaks were added into the employee's day to help reduce stress and fatigue. And then the last section here is on reassignment. That is usually considered an accommodation of last resort, meaning that when accommodations haven't been successful or they've created a hardship for the employer in the employee's current position. But if the employer and the employee both agree that it's a good solution, it can be done at any time. What that means is the employee is reassigned to an open position. The employer doesn't have to create a position. They don't have to bump somebody out of one. They look at what's open that the employee's qualified. Oftentimes that could be a lower position. There might be a class of jobs that the employee's in that they can no longer do based on their brain injury or currently. And so they can put them in a lower position if that better suits their skill level. And here's an example. A cashier encountered extreme difficulty counting back change accurately after the automatic change counter at a register was removed. And so when no effective accommodation could be provided that would help her count the change, the employee was reassigned to a position where she would not have to handle money. And then here's just our Jan information. AskJan.org is our website. You can call toll-free 800-526-7234 for voice, 877-781-9403 for TTY. And then you can use our live chat. That's the red button on our homepage. It's over to the right side. It's up sideways. But that's the quickest way to get a hold of somebody instantly. You can call, leave a message. There's the Jan on Demand, which is a form that asks questions. The more information we get from you, the better answer we'll be able to provide you. And so that Jan on Demand asks questions so that we can get that information. All right. Thank you for listening. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time.
That was great information. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to switch presenters to Ashley at this point. And there's her slides.
Hi there. Okay, so you can't see my slides because I cannot. All right, y'all, I'm going to go very quickly and just talk about our agency first. You can see my slides, correct? Okay. So
Yes,
I work at the
a
Alabama.
little quieter.
I have gotten quieter. Okay.
There
Let me speak up.
Okay.
Okay, so I work at the Alabama Department of Rehab Services, and I just want to give you a brief overview of how our agency works overall. We have 4 main divisions in our agency, and that includes Children's Rehab Services, Vocational Rehab Services, Alabama Independent Living, and Early Intervention. And so our agency houses all of those programs. And then sprinkled in with that, we have several special programs as well. And so we provide a lot of comprehensive services within our one agency here in Alabama, whereas I think a lot of other states do have these separated out. A few of those special programs that I thought you guys would be most interested in. We do have our Rehab Engineering and Assistive Technology program, and that's what I'm a part of. So we provide engineering and assistive technology services to help individuals remove barriers, and we can do that in any environment, school, work, home, or we can even help with any disability and any age. So our little program hosts our whole agency. We work with anybody that is a consumer of our agency. Now, our traumatic brain injury program, that is, well, ADRS is the designated agency to coordinate brain injury services. So that TBI Act is, our agency is the lead agency to coordinate those services, and they can serve lots of different consumers as well throughout our agency. And then we also have our STAR program, which controls our Assistive Technology Act, our Tech Act grant. And so that is what I'm newly a part of. And I will talk to you a little bit more about that at the end. However, I do have a survey that would be fantastic because I am a part of that now. We do have to do federal reporting and find out who we're presenting to. So we just posted that link to the survey in the chat, and I would really greatly appreciate it if you guys could go fill that out. All right, so our engineering program, we do work with all the divisions, all parts of the agency. However, this is where we're mostly utilized within our agency. VR, CRS, and SAIL, which is State of Alabama Independent Living. We do job site accommodations. We have a program called Retaining a Valued Employee, where we go out and we help individuals who are considered valued employees by their employer, and that employer wants to keep them employed. So we can go out and do accommodations and we try to do that pretty quickly so that person can maintain that employment. We do educational assistive technology. We do different types of clinics, including teen transition, where we're helping people transition from school and high school to college or career. And then we have some other environments like home modifications, ramp repairs, and things like that that we're also involved in. So I wanted to spend some time giving you guys examples of accommodations that we've actually done. These examples come from our rehab engineering program, and I'm going to focus more on the custom accommodations that we came up with as opposed to off-the-shelf products, because Jan is a fantastic resource for figuring out accommodations, and especially the off-the-shelf lists that they have for off-the-shelf products. The list that they have on their website is a really, really good resource to help you with that. So I wanted to give you some brain teasers of other things that can be done as examples that we've done for our consumers. And so to start with a no-tech accommodation, we did have an individual who came to us. They had not disclosed to their employer yet that they had difficulty reading. Well, they worked at Walmart, and Walmart requires frequent computer exams, computer-based exams that helps you with promotions and raises. So these are required exams that employees are expected to take. And when we went and we evaluated the consumer, it was discovered by the HR manager while we were there. And she said, well, that's no problem. If I would have known, this is what I could have done. And so from now on, I'll just schedule a time for him to come sit with me in my office, and I'll read the exams out loud to him. And that solved the issue with no technology. This is a low-tech accommodation example that I wanted to give you. This individual was working for a school lunchroom. He washed the dishes and he did other cleaning jobs, janitorial services. Well, at some point, he had worked there for a couple of decades, and at some point, something had happened that was not disclosed. We still don't know to this day what happened, but he started having some cognitive issues that were affecting his job. There were some attitude issues, and there was some memory concerns, and so what we did was really a simple accommodation to make sure that he could complete all of his tasks and every step of those tasks. And because this was a lunchroom environment and he was going to be working around a lot of water and food products, we didn't want to put anything high-tech in there. And then the school had access to these materials where we could just create this poster board for him. And we took pictures of each step of the tasks that he had to do. And this has Velcro, so these items can be moved around by his manager, depending on what order she wants him to complete his tasks for the day. So this is a very low-tech accommodation that was provided. This is another low-tech accommodation that was provided for someone that was doing janitorial services at a company, and the company decided to start requiring timesheets to go through the computer. She had to log into the computer system, and then she had to print that out, take it to the fax machine, and send it to the main office, which was not on campus. And so we ended up just doing a low-tech option for her, because why overwhelm her with more technology when she was already struggling with technology? We took pictures of every step of the process, highlighted what was the next step, and we added that to a binder that she could flip through as she followed the process. Off-the-shelf accommodations are fantastic. They're a lot easier and faster to implement. Generally, if we can do off-the-shelf accommodations in our rehab engineering program, we will try to do that, because that is going to be the most efficient means of getting accommodations. There are so many great products on the market. You can do just internet searches and find a lot of solutions. You can use Jan, you can contact your local VR program, or if there's rehab engineers or assistive technology specialists in your state, they would be good resources. The company reps generally know a lot more about the products than we do. And so it's really good to contact those reps and see, can you get demonstrations? Can they provide training, help with setup, implementation, all of those things. Some of these assistive technology-based companies and manufacturers, they have reps who can help you with that kind of stuff. And then we can also take several of these products and create an entire system for somebody that might be unique in the way it's implemented, but it's still an off-the-shelf product. We just might be using it in a way that it wasn't originally intended. Okay, so what if it's more complex? What do you do if the situation does not really allow for a no-tech, low-tech option or an off-the-shelf product? Well, that's where our rehab engineering services come in, and I'm going to start giving you some examples of those. So this was a gentleman who this job was carved for him. This was his first job he ever had, and he was going to be able to clean up tables at a restaurant. The problem was he utilized a wheelchair for distance mobility, and he would not have been able to carry the products from the tables to the trash and cleaning products without using his wheelchair, and his wheelchair didn't really give him a way to push and propel and carry all those items either. So I used spare materials to build him a custom tray that connects to his wheelchair. And this tray was custom built so that it could sling forward out of the way so he could get up under the table to get all the way to reach the items at the back of the tables. And then it also has a little bar on the front of the tray where he could hang his cleaning supplies. And then it was fit specifically to the types of trays that they use at that restaurant. This is a granola filling station that was built for high school students that had difficulty with fine motor. And so they were not able to hold the bags and the funnels and pour the granola all at the same time. So this little simple funnel station was created for them so that they have only 2 items now that they have to hold instead of 3. This was a cosmetology student who had difficulty standing. And so she needed to be able to use her forearm crutches or sit down. And the problem with cosmetology and doing hair is you have to be able to reach above their head without raising your elbows too high, or it can cause cumulative trauma disorder. And so she really wanted to do hair and pursue that career. And so we ended up getting her an electric stool that she could sit in at chair height. And then it has an electric motor on it so that when she presses the button, it will raise her up. It also has a brake so that when she's getting in, there's less potential for her to fall as the chair is trying to move out from under her. And then it also has wheels so that she can pull herself from each side of the client chair. This was a setup created by a rehab engineer for an individual who wanted to start his own paper shredding business. And in order to do that, he needed a lot of different equipment, and it needed to be able to be pulled behind his vehicle. And so this was a cool situation where this job was created for someone using accommodations from our rehab engineering team. This consumer had difficulty extending his arm. His disability prevented him from being able to extend his right arm completely. So we modified this grass trimmer with a bicycle handle style handle. We extended the right side so that it would come up to his arm instead of him having to reach down to the handle. We also modified the controls so that they would all be controlled with the left side, and we modified the harness as well so the weight of the grass trimmer would hang on his left side, which was his better side. And this was a situation where the job tasks could not be modified or reassigned. For this particular company, everyone that comes in at entry level has to do grass trimmer. And so this is why we needed to modify the grass trimmer for him to be able to do that. And then the following year, he got to move up to the tractor, which was a better job for him. And so we were glad that that was a successful accommodation to get him through his entry level. This individual had an unspecified motor disorder, which can happen with TBI. You know, we can have some of those fine motor and muscle weakness issues. And so he had such weakness in his hands and arms that whenever he would push the mop or broom back and forth, it would actually fold his hands back. And so we needed to take the force of the mop off his hands. And we did that by modifying the mop with a forearm crutch. And I put an extra brace around the wrist. And so all the force when he's pushing the mop back and forth actually goes on his forearm, not on his hands. And then I also just attached this clamp to the edge of the prep station because he had difficulty holding a glove as he was putting his other hand in because of the weakness. He didn't have much of a pinch grasp. And so whenever he was holding the glove and he would shove his other hand in the glove, it would just pull the glove out of the hand that was holding it. So the clamp held the gloves for him long enough for him to get his glove on. All right, this was a situation where we had someone that had a vision impairment and they were asked to scrub these oil spots on a drive-through pavement. And he was not able to see those oil spots because he could not see the contrast. It was not enough contrast for him. He also had difficulty with carrying his supplies from the storage building to the drive-through lane. And so we utilized his cart where he could go grab his supplies, use the cart to push it over to the drive-through. And then I modified the cart with these guides that run along the edge of the curb. And so we determined that the oil spots were sort of in the middle of the drive-through lane. And as long as he ran this along the edge of the curb, then on the other side of the cart, we knew that's where it would run along the oil spots. So he would start mopping or scrubbing the drive-through at the edge of the cart about 2 feet over, and then he would hit all those oil spots. And that was a situation where he used to be accommodated, where that task was reassigned, but when he got a new manager, they quit accommodating him and they wanted him to do all the tasks that everyone else was supposed to do. So manager turnovers can cause future issues for the individuals that you're working with. Just be aware of that and maybe give them a heads up that if something changes to let you know so you can come back and figure out if there's alternate accommodations that can be made. So this situation, this store used to have low counters for their cash registers. Well, they redesigned the store and they put in these taller cash register counters. And so the individual that was working there who utilized a wheelchair for mobility, they were not able to see the keyboard to type in the customer information. And the way they had it set up, it was just too tight to manipulate. And we were trying to figure out all kinds of other things, but it was getting way too difficult. And we finally just realized if we just tilt the keyboard up, he will be able to see the keys, and he was fine with that. He could reach it well. It didn't require any extravagant modifications to the environment. And then in addition to that, we made this keyboard stand where it would fold up so he could store it away when he was not at the cash register, because he didn't have a specific time frame to be up there. He was just there whenever the line started getting backed up. So he could fold that up, put it away, and it would not be in the way of any other employees that used the cash register. And what was great about this case, and I'm bringing this up because this could happen to you, is this individual he's very good at what he does. He's very proud about being independent. He did not want any other accommodations. He said, this is the one thing that I'm having trouble with. That's all I want accommodations for. Well, when he realized how well this accommodation was implemented and it was not obtrusive, it wasn't that, it wasn't something that was super obvious, he decided to call me back. There's more. He decided to call me back and say, you know what, there's this other thing that I'm having an issue with. Do you think that you could come up with a solution to that? The other thing that he was having an issue with was being able to carry products that had been returned at the register back out into the store, because he would try to put them in his lap, and as he pushed his wheelchair, they would fall. So what we ended up doing was attaching this mount to his chair. This is a mount that's used for several different communication devices. It could be used to hold a tablet or a cell phone, but we used this mount here, and we attached a tool bag to the side of his chair so that he could put his scanner and any other objects in that tool bag that would fit to help him distribute it back out to the store. So our rehab engineering program also works with home accessibility. We can go out and look at the home to determine what accommodations need to be made to make it more accessible. We can get those referrals through any part of our agency. And I mention this for even vocation purposes because sometimes the accessibility in and out of the home can prevent someone from successfully maintaining employment. And so that's why it's important to also make sure that their home allows them to get in and out independently, so they don't have to rely on someone else to get them out of the home. And here we have a stair lift, we have a platform lift, and this is a stair chair lift, and then this is a ramp that was built by our agency. So let me talk to you about our new project. This is Accessing Potential Through Assistive Technology. We're calling it APTAT. It's brand new. This is where we are going to provide services for the Tech Act grant that our agency manages through STAR. And we are going to be building a lending library of assistive technology. We're going to be doing product demonstrations, AT training, providing technical assistance, information and referral, and many states, nearly all of them, participate in this Tech Act grant. So the reason I wanted to mention it to you all is that you may have a project or a program like this in your state that has a lending library that you can borrow assistive technology from that may also be able to provide training and demonstrations. And in order to find your program, let's see, did I put it on? You should go to this website, the AT3 Center. They will have a list of all of these programs across the country. And so go see if there is another resource that you can tap into to find assistive technology resources. And so I'm going to see on ours. Now, our lending library is specific to Alabama citizens. However, if you would like to follow some of the training we're going to start providing and some of the updates on what we're doing, these links are in the handout that's under your handout module on GoToWebinar. So go check those out. Follow us on Facebook. I also just created a LinkedIn and a YouTube channel. It's all new, so there's not a lot there, but there will be. And also you can follow our e-newsletter, sign up for that, and I will be sending out updates on assistive technology. So that's it for me. I think that we can close out here. Maria or Haley, do you want to do questions or anything? Oh, also, if you guys will please go fill out that participant survey that's in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you. We're very close to time. I don't know if we have any time for questions, and that's okay. I was going to ask Melanie to pop back on camera if she would, though. Fabulous information, and just a few take homes that I heard you guys discussing that might be good to emphasize. It sounds very much to me, Melanie, like anyone can contact Jan for resources, whether it's the employee, the employer, rehabilitation community provider, anyone.
Absolutely. I had a call one day from a neighbor. Her neighbor had an intellectual disability and she thought he wasn't getting a fair shake at work, and she wanted to call to see what she could do to help him. I thought that was really cool.
That's very cool. Even if a business notices perceived deficits in performance that somebody has not disclosed, they can reach out, correct?
Yes, yes.
Great. Ashley, I'm glad you mentioned that everybody about in every state has the ability to access the program with the Technology Act in their state, and she gave you information to do that. Any challenges that have been almost insurmountable in terms of assistive technology or reasonable accommodations questions you've gotten? Anything?
Me?
Either one of you.
Not that I can think of.
I'm also glad you mentioned something about stepping back in if the supervisor changes or if roles change, because that really throws individuals with traumatic brain injury for a loop, or other cognitive challenges. So that's really
Right.
important.
It can be difficult.
Any last words? Anything you want to share before we wrap up? Oh, Melanie, you're muted.
That's a Jan.
Cannot hear you. Well, we're at time. I so appreciate the time you have given to us. And just before we close, I was going to tell you we have a few other activities just to remind you of. We hope you enjoyed today's event. Our next webinar is in January on partnering with your University Centers for Excellence, Education, Research, and Service, as we call the UCEDS. You may want to tune in for that. We have other training events, other products, other podcasts, and our Leading Practices Academies. That's all a part of our NASHIA Training U. So stay tuned for more information about those. NASHIA is a membership organization. Consider joining us, and more information can be found on our website about that. We appreciate you so much viewing our webinar today. Reach out if you want to receive notice of future events or other resources that we have. Our archived webinars are available online. And last but not least, don't forget to complete your evaluations at the end of this webinar. Have a great, great day. Thank you.